Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Marketing That Keeps Sales Moving Forward. Before we dive in, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, and a link to the on-demand version will be shared with all registrants after the event. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time using the chat feature. We'll address questions at the end of the session, time permitting. If we do not get to your question, we will reach out after the event. You can also access many valuable additional resources and helpful links through the event portal at any time during this session. And now I'm pleased to introduce today's host, Catarina Hoch, Global Head of Marketing as a Service, memoryBlue. Kat leads integrated marketing programs that accelerate pipeline for high-growth B2B tech companies worldwide. With deep expertise in complex sales cycles, account-based management, and go-to-market strategy, Kat is passionate about helping customers break into new markets. Her leadership is powered by a hands-on approach that keeps customers' goals at the center of every engagement. Kat, over to you.
Thanks so much, Stacey. Love the introduction. I didn't even know I was all of these things. Thank you so much. And to join me today, I have the amazing Flo Broderick. She is the CRO at General Index. So Flo, she is a CMO turned CRO. She's got a decade of experience scaling SaaS and data businesses globally from European HQs, both in mid-market and enterprise segments. She has deep experience in geospatial and AI from her time at scaling Cato, as well as telecommunications from her time at Telefonica in their HQ in Madrid. Flo is passionate about growing high-performance, diverse, and driven teams to achieve big results with sensible unit economics. She now works as a CRO of General Index in London, a high-growth, energy-priced data business trusted by some of the largest energy companies, hedge funds, and consulting firms. Welcome for today. Thank you for joining us, Florence.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And Nicola. Nicola, we've known each other for a while now through Pavilion.
Long time.
Yeah, and Nicola has been in the startup and scale-up world for over 25 years. I mean, you probably started when you were 6 months old or something like that, Nicola.
God, I'm so old.
Across a range of industries, including leading the marketing function at Go Partners and My Tutor. She's now partner at Growth & Company, supporting VCs and founders on growth and building high-performing teams alongside running a community of growth leaders. Nicola is passionate about the power of community and also runs CMO Circle with over 450 UK marketing leaders and the London chapter of Pavilion. She's been a qualified business coach for over 12 years and runs her own coaching practice on the side. I'm not sure when you find time to sleep, but that's Nicola for you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm wonderful to have some time with both of you, my two favourite marketers. Well, I should say, and sales now.
Oh, yeah, there we go. See, she turned to the other side, Nicola.
I know, she left us.
It's all marketing, really.
Yeah. There we go. Oh, I love that. Love that. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining. I mean, I'm sure it'll be a super interesting conversation. As Stacey said, if anybody has a question, please drop them in the chat and we can address it later. But today really is about talking about marketing and sales alignment, doing more with less, all of these things that we hear so many times. So let's just start with that then. We all know that in today's market, marketing budgets are under more scrutiny than ever. And we all as marketers have become masters of doing more with less. So Flo, maybe let's start with you. I mean, you've been working on large enterprises like Telefonica, also in the startup world. How do you go about defining your strategy and tactics from a marketing perspective to get the most ROI out of your marketing dollars?
Yeah, I think one of the great things about working in startups and scale-ups is, unlike big corporates, typically everybody's got the same goal, right? And it's typically tied very closely to ARR. So knowing getting everybody to focus on what really moves the needle is actually quite easy, whereas you get contrasting priorities in large corporates sometimes. So for me, I think whenever in my time as a CMO, every single thing we did was all about, okay, but how does this drive ARR, and not just short-term ARR, but long-term ARR, and thinking about LTV CAC ratios and how we bring on customers that are going to stay. They're going to be great customers for a long time at high ticket sizes, right? So I think when it comes to working out the ROI side of things, I think the most important thing is it's changing so fast in marketing all the time is you have to experiment, and every single campaign or initiative has to have a business case behind it. And you have to have success metrics, and then really think about how much budget you're pouring into each of these campaigns in order to be able to calculate that ROI afterwards. And so that's all about building systems to do that, right? And I think when you're in a smaller company, that's much easier than if you're in a huge corporate where you've got loads of CRMs and loads of tools. Actually getting HubSpot or Salesforce whipped into shape in a Series A, Series B business is a lot easier than a big organization. And therefore using those tools to measure the impact of campaigns is actually quite straightforward, depending on what your go-to-market motion is. So I'm just led by data, obsessed with data. That doesn't mean that you don't need the qualitative side of things and to be able to apply the kind of knowledge and customer feedback on top of those statistics. But that's typically how I think about it, is how do you get the processes in place to really understand what's moving the needle when it comes to high quality lead flow, pipeline generation, and then close won revenue. Yeah,
makes sense. Nicola, you've worked in different sizes of companies, and obviously advising lots of CMOs that go through that and have those challenges as well. Is there any example that you could share with us of any high impact, low resource tactics that you've seen deliver good pipeline results?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to do is work out where the blockers are. Where do you actually need to be focusing your efforts, particularly if you've got a small marketing team? I think often it's like, oh, we need more leads. But actually, sometimes the biggest impact you can have is middle of the funnel. And sometimes it's with your existing customers as well. And we forget all about them. So the number of times I've gone in and worked with clients and they're like, oh, we've got to have more top of funnel. And you see they've got such a poor conversion rate mid funnel. It's like, what is going on here? And sometimes it can be as simple as, we just don't have enough case studies and references. And it's because they're not putting enough effort on working with the customer success team and getting those stories and those references from those existing customers. And that can also help speed up the sales cycle as well. And I think often when you've got limited budgets, it's like, well, we just can't do these big events. We can't do private events, and they just don't need to cost much money. You don't need to exhibit an event. Sometimes it's enough to attend and just be everywhere. You can do all sorts of guerrilla tactics, like when people come out of a talk that's very relevant for you, grabbing them as they leave, giving out flyers, being present at all the events and having those important conversations, or even just running a low-key satellite event as well. And something that worked really well with us as well was just doing those more intimate events. And everyone thinks they're so expensive. But actually, you can do a really nice breakfast for about 25 people for £800 to £1,000. And the great thing about doing a breakfast, it's no one drinks unless you're obviously doing some sort of Bellini. So they end up being a lot cheaper as well. But there's other things like really enabling social selling in your organization. You can spend a lot of money on LinkedIn advertising when actually getting your co-founders to start posting, or some of your other leadership team to post on a regular basis, can do just as much. So it's about being creative. And that's what marketers do best. So don't necessarily follow the formula. Think a bit outside the box.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we were just chatting before we started the session here about also some companies just obsessed with just throwing money at a lot of different things and kind of seeing what sticks without actually thinking through what the customers really care about and where do they live and what do they do and how can we reach them, and really kind of looking into what are investments you already have and optimize what you already have in place. I think we chatted about that as well. So many times we see companies that have massive tech stacks and they completely underutilize what they have, and often just doing an audit and looking into what they have in place and if there is things that you can reduce or optimize, or, often you're paying for people that are no longer there. So I guess also just looking at your current resources and trying to optimize what you have in place is also a great way to doing more with less.
So true. We were talking, weren't we, about every time I go into a new company, I do a bit of an audit of the tech stack. And in one company, I won't mention them, I discovered we were still paying for a PR agency they hadn't worked for 7 months. So $5,000 a month. So that was a nice bit of budget to run a few events for me, and tools that when you actually looked at when people last used them, 0 or just a couple of people, and yet we were paying for 5, 10 seats. Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're breaking some SaaS salespeople's hearts around here. They're just going in and checking. But yeah, I see that a lot with contact data enrichment tools. So, you know, nobody's really been in control of it in RevOps or in sales leadership. And everybody said, well, my favorite's Lusher, my favorite's Apollo, my favorite's Cognizant. And sometimes there is a place for 2 or 3 of them because they get you better data in certain geographies, or some are better at mobiles, some are better at emails. But most of the time, something's underutilized. And often the problem is that we have to treat the businesses that we're in like they're our own business. And if I'm the CEO and founder, I don't want that wastage. But often people come in, and because none of their bonus plan or incentives are aligned to tool stack reduction, nobody really bothers with it. But actually, so often, if you can show your CEO, founder, look, I think I can free up 80K in tooling here across the entire stack, but I want to be able to spend that on XYZ campaigns. A good example as well that, Nicola, you've mentioned this before, is partner marketing. I like to call partner marketing half price marketing, because often
split the bill.
Exactly, split the bill, whether that's
Totally.
or whatever it might be, but also you reach 2 completely different databases and have strengths across different channels. And so I've always really, particularly when you're David and the partner's Goliath, that's just electric for your business. So if you can build those types of partnerships, that's extremely powerful for lead gen.
Yeah, 100%.
Makes so much sense. Yeah. Well, there's a few good tactics here that we discussed. Let's move on to balancing short-term success with long-term brand building. And I think we all agree that it doesn't have to be one thing or the other, but we do see lots of organizations that just over-indexing on demand gen to chase those short-term results, and often don't really focus on the brand building element, which sometimes is a bit more difficult to prove the ROI and show like how many leads we get from sponsoring that event or things like that. So how do we go about balancing that short-term success with the long-term brand building? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do get really frustrated when people say brand versus performance, because it's definitely on a spectrum, and brand supports performance and vice versa. You know, you might be doing a big event, which is all about building your brand, but it's still going to generate leads. On the other hand, if you're doing a load of work on SEO to generate leads, that's also going to support your brand as well. I think the first thing is to understand, what's the challenge? Is it that your audience are actually problem aware, but they're not considering you? Or is it that they're not even aware that there is a solution for this problem? They just assume, well, this is just status quo. This is just how things are. And really understanding how much of an education piece there needs to be. Or is it really about making sure you are part of that consideration process? Once you understand that, I think it's then about, are we really focusing much more on the education side? Or is it more about making sure that when people are looking for the solution, we are being listed as one of those? And then once you've got that understood, I think it's about being aligned with the sales team and what the expectations are. We all know that stat, only 5% of businesses in your target market are ever going to be in market at that one time. So how do you make sure that that other 95% have you top of mind when they are in market? And I think one of the biggest challenges is that we as marketers will run some brand activity that will serve us in the longer term, and we'll have customers coming through from that in the future, but it's not going to deliver results right now, and the sales team want results right now. So it's about being upfront and saying, we're running this activity. We are doing a podcast about this because we want to drive education. It's an opportunity for us to bring prospects on as guests, for example. We're not going to see immediate response, so don't expect that. We're going to measure this on how many of our prospects can we get on as guests, and how many listeners, and what's our reach here. And then what you want to make sure is that over time, my best source of actual attribution, which costs nothing, is to make sure your sales team are always saying, how did you hear about us? And What you want to be seeing is, oh, well, actually, we heard about you on this podcast a while ago, and then we started to investigate you. And the number of times I've heard companies say, well, we ran this podcast and we really weren't sure about the effect. And then 6 months down the line, we're getting people saying, oh, yeah, I first heard about you on the podcast. It was so interesting. I didn't even know you existed up until then. And you can really start to see the impact. But what's so important is that you're aligned on that from the beginning, because otherwise you're running this activity, you're hitting those metrics, but everyone's like, well, this isn't working. Haven't had any good quality leads through. And it's like, this is not what the purpose is. So getting that alignment up front is absolutely key.
And I think a lot of the things that aren't measurable, like imagine all of the things that we can measure and we can attribute things to. Now there is this whole other world that we can't measure. So it just shows how much more you get from everything you do. That is even better than what you can measure. I think that was quite a long
all of
answer,
this enhancement.
And talking of podcast, Nicola, like Flo and I, we met through a podcast, and then now all the relationships that you build on things. How can you measure the effectiveness of those relationships, and how many people will then refer your business? Or this is all not measurable, right? But you kind of know you need to do that.
And it's where all the discussion happens. I mean, Kat, you've just joined the CMO circle. I'm so delighted to have you in there. But there are so many conversations. We're looking for this solution. Anyone got any recommendations? And what you see isn't people just saying, oh, I would definitely go with this one. We really recommend them, or definitely don't go with this one. That also comes up. But I see quite a lot of people saying, look, we haven't used this platform, but they do a great podcast, or they've got great content out there. You might want to investigate them. So you've got all of this word of mouth piece, which is before you've even started to engage with them. They haven't even come to your website yet, but that's where they're actually making 80% of their decision. It's based on what other people in their community are saying.
And the other thing you mentioned about the self-attribution, asking, where did you hear about us? And it's so funny because we've got that field on our website, and often the answers we get, they give you a hint of where they heard about you, but they don't give you the full picture. Because if I think of my customer journey with solutions that I bought, I checked their website, and then I heard a podcast, and then somebody told me about them, and then I saw an ad. So like, it's never a linear journey, right? So I think as marketers, we need to really think about where our target audience is and surround it with different strategies, so that whenever the time is right, they come back to us. So just as you said.
Yeah, I don't know what the number of touches is now. It seems to grow exponentially, but it's like they need to hear about your brand over, I think it's about 70 times now before actually a decision's made. On that note, I mean, this was a long time ago, but I controversially launched advertising on Facebook, as it was called back then when it was at Go Cardless. And everyone was like, hang on a minute, you do not do Facebook advertising for B2B. And I was like, we're targeting SMBs. We're going to test this out. And the sales team were like, it's not working. No, nothing direct. This is a complete disaster, Nicola. And then when they started to ask customers, how did you hear about us? Even though they'd come through PPC or SEO or at an event, they were like, oh, I saw some of your ads on Meta. And they were like, oh, can you start doing a bit more of this, please? It actually seems to be working. And I made it really clear why I was asking them to find out from the client where they'd heard about us. Because I said, that means I'm investing money in the right places. It's really valuable. And so if they said, oh, we saw you at an event, they didn't just leave it there. They said, oh, tell me about the event. What did you see? So they'd get me as much info as possible, because they started to see the benefit of that as well.
Yeah. Flo, what are your thoughts? And do you see like many marketers sometimes getting stuck in that short-term mode? And like, what is your thoughts on balancing things correctly?
More often than not, when I see marketers in short-term mode, it's because they've joined a business and the founders or the CEO or other LT members have got them into short-term mode because they've landed and not given them time to actually come up with a proper strategy that is balanced and balances all these things that we're talking about here. But short-term mode is very dangerous. And I think, coming back to leadership, it's so important that you work for any marketers who are thinking about their next gig here, is make sure you work for a CEO and CFO that believe and get marketing. And they may be scarred. They may have had bad experiences with marketers that don't show them data and don't actually pitch a proper strategy to them. So I think I've always been quite fortunate to work for CEOs that really get marketing, and therefore understand that sometimes there isn't going to be all the data to support the decision, and it is a brand thing. But I earn the right to be able to get that trust by being data obsessed on a lot of the other demand gen stuff. So earn your right to be able to go hard on brand by being in the details on every single metric that is you own, I think is one of the things I would say. I saw a great presentation a couple of years ago, actually, from some of the demand gen team at Cognism. And they were talking about, and this is a classic demand gen versus brand thing, which is, should we gate or should we ungate? The short-term demand gen driven thing is to gate all your content and just watch the MQLs flow in and count them up and show those statistics around your organization. Whereas the long-term brand play is, well, if all of that content were ungated, way more people would look at it. And therefore the Cognism brand grows, and they actually showed the data on over an 18-month period how much more their pipeline grew as a result of that decision. And for me, that was a real penny drop moment, because there's a lot of businesses that are still in that just gate everything mode. And actually, in a time where everybody's got Google on one tab, ChatGPT on another, Perplexity on another, there's so much information at our fingertips. By gating that, you're not then filtering into their workflows. We've seen so many more leads come through ChatGPT and Perplexity in the past few months, and that's because we don't gate too much of our content. It's out there, and it means that we leak into the results that come from people prompting those LLMs. So I think there's a big argument to start ungating, actually, and think about brand.
And I think people forget that when you gate, then the engines can't actually track it, and so it's not going to appear. And people just forget about that.
Yeah.
And you also add friction to the process, right? So
people are like, why should I give you my details for this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I'm fully involved with that. Okay, well, let's talk about sales and marketing alignment. It's an eternal B2B debate, and I mean, we've got a CMO turned CRO here on our chat today. So I'd love to hear from you, Flo. What was your experience of stepping into the CRO role, looking back at your CMO time? Where do you see those gaps and those issues happening when there is issues between sales and marketing alignment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just a big believer, whether it's marketing or sales, in like extreme rigor, discipline, intensity in the way I work, which is probably why I like working in small businesses, right? Because you can move fast and you can move with that intensity. And I think the biggest issues is when the intensity is not at the same level either side, i.e. maybe the marketing team has got some kind of vanity metrics or flaky metrics, and the sales leader's frustrated because they keep on saying they've got lots of MQLs and actually none of them are decent and none of them are converting. And then the other frustration might be on this other side for the CMO, that they're actually creating really great leads and loads of campaigns, and actually the SLAs aren't in place to make sure that those leads are followed up on in a timely and a high quality way. So I think that's just the most important thing. And for me, like I wouldn't join a business as CMO unless I felt that there was definitely that chemistry working with the CRO or the VP sales, whoever it might be. And that you really see things in the same way on intensity, drive, discipline, etc. I love it when people talk about SLAs, because they really do matter. But you also need to be able to exercise common sense. Like I'll give you an example. I used to be like, these leads need following up on the next day. But there's no point if you've been at a conference all week on a Thursday following up on those leads on a Friday, because everybody's absolutely exhausted from the conference that they've been to. They're traveling back to wherever they're going to. So I definitely have some more appreciation for some of these things since becoming a sales leader, just being on the road more and seeing a lot more of these things in real life. I mean, I always, as a CMO, my mantra was always be selling. Like I went to trade shows, I sold like I was an AE on the booth. I always prospected outbound, even when I was a CMO, because I wanted to understand what it was like to be doing that. And that's actually why I originally joined Pavilion, because at the time, Pavilion had a lot more CROs and sales leaders than it had CMOs. Now it's much more balanced. But I used to love going to dinners and just being sat with 8 people who think in that way of sales and CROs. So I would really understand what they think about and how I can be the best possible partner for them and be sales leaning. And that's kind of one of the ways I always pitch myself. I don't pitch myself as a great brand marketer, if I'm honest. I pitch myself as a very sales leaning CMO, because just not enough of them are commercially driven and in the detail and can talk you through exactly who's on the buying committee, what's the average deal size, what's the average sales cycle, how does that buying committee fluctuate by geography, whatever it might be. Like all of that detail the marketing side needs to know as well. And I'd like to see the same interest from the sales side in what we're doing in marketing as well. So yeah, and I just think like the same way that with any role, like 1 in 10 people are outstanding at what they do. I hear the same on CROs and CMOs. So I just try and look to work with those outstanding people, and you will have that alignment.
Yeah, I love what you said. I heard it on another podcast where you mentioned that you used to get excited about pipeline when you were a CMO, and now you get excited about DocuSigns. I love that.
Yeah, my favorite sound now is the ding of DocuSign. I love it.
That's it. And I guess, I think lots of companies, I was at an event last week actually, and I was surprised by, they were asking like how many marketers are compensated on sales results. And there was quite just a handful of people that actually raised their hand saying they get commission or bonus based on sales performance. And I think the metrics element and just like everybody working towards the same goal makes such a difference when you have, marketers with a mind of sales to be able to really drive those results.
Yeah.
So, I'd highly recommend companies to use that approach to really get that alignment going.
I also love what you said about getting really involved in sales and understanding it. I remember the first time I met you, Florence, and you were talking about basically being in AE events and doing sales calls. And I was like, oh my God, I really need to do more of this. But also we see at Pavilion, I love getting CMOs to do CRO school. I always highly recommend that. And I also recommend CROs do CMO school. So I'm always very happy when I'm on it and I see some salespeople in there, because I think it's just as important they learn our language and some of our challenges as well. Flo, what do you wish you'd known as a CMO about sales that you've learned being a CRO?
What do I wish I'd known? I think, coming to your point there about people learning each other's discipline is one of the big objections, or kind of like, oh, people are going to be skeptical about this when you become a CRO is I have not been an AE and I have not carried a quota like many of the people who now work for me who've carried a quota for maybe 15 years in their career. And everybody, I think, likes to make out like sales is some kind of dark art that is, that maybe the science of it's 10% and then art of it's 90%. And I think after a couple of years in it now, I think it is a blend, but it's also, it's really emotional intelligence driven. A lot of marketing can actually be more, if you're in a more technical marketing role, it might be more IQ driven and being really good at tools and really good at analysis, really good at positioning, which is more of a creativity thing. But I think being still a big part of sales, being great at it, is really having high emotional intelligence and understanding who those different people in your deals, what they care about, how you should speak to them, how do you navigate communicating to this one and maybe taking that conversation on LinkedIn with them and then with emails, that guy prefers calls. There's just so much to it with emotional intelligence. So I think that's the learning I take, is that's really a big part of it, and coaching salespeople to be great at EQ. It's difficult to coach on EQ.
I can imagine. And building that rapport. I remember Hannah on one of the podcasts saying she measured herself on time to laugh. How quickly could she make someone laugh on a call? Because they were more likely to get involved and be more open and vulnerable about the situation they were in. And that was so critical. And I think that's a great metric to have. Otherwise, it can become very functional.
Yeah, very
follow
true.
The script. I've got to follow MedPick. Right, here we go. Tick the boxes.
Yeah, very true. Nicola, I mentioned you shared a while back that you had some challenges around sales and marketing alignment when you were in one of your previous companies, and you had a great way to solve that, which was going for a coffee with a CRO. So tell us a bit more about that experience.
Oh, my famous story. So I always think I'm a good person to talk about sales and marketing alignment, because I got it so wrong when I first started at Go Cardless. And basically, marketing was totally focused. All our goals were around SMB, and sales was all around mid-market. And I had no incentives to actually do anything around mid-market. And I have never worked with a sales team before. So I had no idea how it worked. I didn't even know what an SDR was when I joined. And it really came to a head when one of the sales team said to me, God, it's like having divorced parents. And I thought, something really needs to change. And I thought I had an incredibly arrogant, very overconfident CRO, the classic alpha male, zero interest in marketing and just expecting me to do what he said, really. And went for coffee with him and got a whole different story. He was like, we really need to collaborate. I totally get that. I am just under the cosh for numbers all the time, and I feel like I'm on my own. I was like, well, you're not on your own. Let's attack this together. And we did, and we even changed the format of how sales and marketing work together. And one of the things we started doing was we had some very clear ICPs. We had energy, we had accountants, we had the fitness space, and we actually created cross-functional teams so that they were actually tasked to work together. And that was everything from, let's make sure we've now done our ICP, let's get sales brought into the messaging side and involved in it, because they're the ones that are listening to customers all the time. They've got all the language insights as well. And then let's come up with a joint go-to-market strategy that we're all working on. And it made such a difference having these pods, because suddenly the two teams were one team. We didn't have a sales kickoff and a marketing kickoff, which is what we used to have. And I hate the words marketing, but we had that go-to-market alignment together. And we used to do some fun exercises like switch roles. So we'd get sales to come up with some content pieces, and then marketing had to do pitches, and the sales team would actually mark them on them. And it just meant life was so much easier because we really understood each other and we had a common goal. So it went from disaster to delight.
Yeah. And another thing where we often see issues is the alignment between marketing and SDRs, right? And there is always that debate if SDRs should report into sales or into marketing. And I guess this is open for discussion here. But I wanted to share some stats that I heard in an event last week where the VP of marketing at Chili Piper, she shared that when they have SDR sourced deals with no marketing touches, it takes about 300 days to close a deal. When it's marketing sourced only with no SDR involvement, it takes 243 days to close. And when the deals are joined by SDR and marketing collaborating, it's 192 days. So that's a 36% quicker sales cycle when SDRs and marketing are aligned. And that's 100 days less in the sales cycle to close a deal. And so those numbers were, it amazes me to see that, data. Because really, like you would expect that SDRs and marketing should be fully aligned. But often when you go into companies, you see like marketing is chasing one list of accounts and the SDRs are going after something else. They're just doing their own thing and they like to go code and all of these things. So, I'd love to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on how to align it? And Flo, I know you have managed SDRs before as part of your marketing function. I'm thinking even now you are. So is there any advice you would give to companies that are trying to close that gap between aligning marketing and SDRs? And what do you see working for that alignment?
Yeah, I mean, on the reporting line, I always answer the question in the same way, is that SDRs should sit wherever they're going to get the most coaching possible. And the highest quality coaching, because often that's somebody's first sales role. It's sometimes their first job even. And so them having a great mentor who can really coach them on how to prospect effectively, coach them on ICP, teach them all the emotional intelligence stuff that we mentioned earlier is just really important. And it does help, if they sit in marketing, then obviously they're hearing about all of the campaigns that are coming and getting that kind of multi-angle effect that you're talking about there with Chili Piper, whereby, it's funny that SDR reached out to me at that company. I just saw their ads the other day and I visited their website. All of those things come together quite nicely if they sit within marketing. But I don't see any reason why that can't work in sales as well. It's just, again, that the sales and marketing need to be tied at the hip. But I also think that SDRs can become, the obvious career path for most SDRs is to become AEs. But I've also had incredible SDRs become marketers in my teams before. There's a couple of those. And the reason they're great marketers is because they have been literally at the coalface in the trenches, and they've had to deal with the objections. They've understood the pain points. They've seen how things are different in different verticals and geographies. And so they tend to be really product savvy really quickly. It's the best possible onboarding you can have, because you will speak probably to the greatest number of prospects in the organization as an SDR, more so than the CEO, more so than the account executive or the head of sales. And so they kind of mop up a ton of customer insight. And I was actually thinking at the beginning of this, like, what's the difference? Because I said sales and marketing, it's all marketing really. I could say it's all sales really. The difference is that with marketing, we kind of have time to think about positioning, what a deck looks like and what a copy looks like on a paid ad. In sales, it's just real-time marketing. It's like, I haven't got time. My pitch has got to be super sharp, right there, on point. I haven't got time to think about how I'm going to word this. And so essentially, doing selling is basically learning to market in real time.
And
do that.
Experimentation in real time as well, because you're constantly trying out different pitches. And Flo, I couldn't agree more. My 2 best product marketers came from SDRs, and they're both now CMOs. So
Wow.
they did a fabulous job, and they just had such great customer insights, and they were also brilliant at messaging as well. And they didn't even realize they were doing it. And I said to one of them, have you ever thought about marketing? He's like, I just didn't think that was an option for me. I was like, it is now. Come talk to me. I think what's really key here as well is that so often SDRs will go out with their outbound emails, calls, and they'll just be talking about booking in a call and actually starting softer, saying, we've got a webinar, we've got a dinner, we've got this great piece of content, is actually a much better way to start engaging. And it's making sure that the SDRs are aware of what they can be sharing. Because sometimes you see these divides where marketing are off doing this great webinar, the SDRs have no idea. So they don't even know that's something they can be communicating, which actually may have much better results than just sending out, can we book in a demo? So really key. I don't think it ever matters where they sit. I think it's just all about alignment.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. Right, we're coming to the end. So I just wanted to talk about one more thing. Obviously, we've been talking about lean models, and, everybody tried to do more with less and things like that. And often leveraging partners is a great way to really get the most out of your investments. So I'd love to hear from you. When does it make sense to bring in agencies, freelancers, fractional experts to really have that helping hand or bring some expertise in a specific space? Is there any examples that you could share where you leveraged agencies before that have been a great help and brought results?
I think it's when you're missing that skill set internally, and particularly when it's project based and you don't need someone full time. So I've always used freelancers or consultants when we're looking at doing rebrands. And often they can be brilliant as well at upskilling some of your more junior members. So if you've got someone that's really interested in that space, that's going to be the brand guardian later on, you bring them in to do the project, and at the same time, that junior member's really learning from them. So that's great L&D as well. Testing out new channels, or when you've got small budgets. I've seen companies where they've got a full-time PPC manager with a spend of $5,000 a month. It's like, you just don't need someone at this level. You can have a brilliant freelancer or very small agency. My top tip here, though, is if you've got small budgets, do not work with a big agency. Find a freelancer, find a very small agency where they're going to see you as a really important client. You're not going to get that lost in all these bigger clients with much bigger spends. And one of my favorite stories is Go Cardless. I worked with a tiny digital agency called Target, and there was 2 of them. 2 brothers had just set it up, and we had, I can't remember what our spend was, but we were basically their biggest client because they'd only just started out. Now they have 1,000 people working for them. But at the time, they were just phenomenal, and they put so much effort into our account because they really wanted to use our brand name for us to stick with them. Same with PR agencies. Get a really good freelancer or somebody that's maybe been in-house and is just starting, because that way you'll get lots of attention. And always treat them as an extension as your team. I asked one agency, how can we actually support you better? What could we do better? And they just said, we've never been asked that before. And actually, you've got to work together. And so it's just as important that you're giving them what they need as they're giving you what you need as well.
100%. And as you said, don't treat them as a partner, as somebody that's part of your team, because otherwise it just becomes a very transactional relationship, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Flo, any experience from your side?
No, I completely agree with Nicola, really. Treat them as if they're an extension of your team, and so they become aligned with your culture, and you get them access to as many tools and as many pieces of information as you can internally, so that they can make the most contextualized decisions possible and build the best work that they can for you. I think that's really important. And I think just sometimes when you're in a business and you're all in one category, imagine you are in real estate, SaaS, I don't know. Often, 80% of the company's always been in the real estate world or real estate tech world. And sometimes the value of having people who come from an adjacent category or a completely different category helps you as a business to get away from this group think that you might have. So I think just sometimes that breath of fresh air is a very good thing, particularly because most SaaS companies are trying to disrupt the status quo in a certain industry. That's normally always in the opening tagline, isn't it? So if you want to do that, you're probably not going to do that if you just keep hiring people from the same companies, the same categories. You need people that come at problems in a different way, and that's the value of having fractional people, agencies, etc.
So true.
That. Such a good way to think
So
about
true.
it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, we're coming to the end. I just wanted to give people a quick overview about memoryBlue. I'm sure I don't need to give the full pitch because lots of you already know us. But essentially, we help B2B tech vendors to accelerate their sales and revenue through outsourced sales and marketing services, either by delivering it in-house in terms of us setting up the SDR teams and marketing campaigns for our companies to see the pipeline flowing, or by our recruitment services and through our academy, where companies can use us to hire reps for them, and then we will train them for them to have their teams in-house. We have about 650 SDRs worldwide, selling in 22 languages, 9 offices globally, and we've been in business for over 25 years supporting, well, not 25 years yet, over 20 years, supporting B2B customers on their growth journeys. So that's us about memoryBlue. And I just wanted to thank you again, Nicola and Flo, for coming on here. It was amazing to hear all your thoughts and insights. Lots of actionable tips here to take away. So thank you so much again for coming on board.
Thank you for having us. It was so fun.
Yeah, great to see you both.
Thank you. Bye.